he went to, I think he went to Japan, and then he went to, where else did he go? He went to America and did all that piece. And he just said that the speed and uptake of Australia as opposed to Japan was just crazy. Like Japan they just like to do everything slowly but do it properly.
Yes.
So,
yes,
which is basically very, that's pretty understandable, I guess.
Yes, in Japan they're very risk averse. But that said, I used to work at Lion Dairy and Drinks, and they were owned by Kirin, and they launched something crazy, like their non-alcoholic beverages division would launch something like 100 different non-alcoholic beverages every summer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then you'd ask them, what's working and how many of them stick, and it was like 1 in 100, and one of their most popular products was like a sparkling lemon water, and it had been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I said, why are you launching that many products? They said, because Suntory launches 120 and Asahi launches 80 or something, So, yeah, they do stuff en masse, but to the Japanese are very risk averse.
It sounds like VCs.
Yes.
With VCs, they'll go and have, they'll have 10 investments, and
yes.
The reason why they always go for ones that are pitching $1 billion idea is because they actually need for that $1 billion idea to pay off, or else they can't get their money back. So their kind of goal is to do 10 investments, and potentially one would pay off.
Yeah.
But that's why it has to be.
Yes.
Has to be 100x.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, for sure,
mate. So are we up and going, Tommy? Are we recording?
We are on those ones, yeah. So.
Yeah, cool, perfect, awesome, mate. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation, Tim.
So, mate, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, as opposed to a little bit about BeerCo as a starting point?
Sure. Okay. So my background, I guess, how I ended up doing BeerCo and in the brewing industry is I'm a home brewer originally, and started home brewing when I was very young, like high school age, and through university years. Took time out when I was earning in my early 20s and that sort of thing. Was busy travelling, and I travelled with work. I was fortunate to travel through Asia and then into the UK. Landed back in Australia in about 2003, actually. So I've been here for nearly 20 years, and I was working at a big brewer originally at Foster's, and looking after their marketing through Southeast Asia. And I used to pester all the brewers about, why don't you make some beers with flavour? And they'd laugh at me and that sort of thing. And then after I did that, I worked in dairy and drinks business, which ironically got purchased by Lion. And I worked in Southeast Asia, so I've always had an international business focus. And after, I don't know how many years of corporate, I decided to do some consulting, and I was helping food businesses. But I kept sort of getting pulled back to the brewing industry, and it's just something I've always loved, and it's been really exciting to start a business in the brewing industry. But I sort of felt like it was quite funny when I started BeerCo and going back 2013, I remember stewarding at the Beer Awards, and there was just all these beers coming from around the world, and I thought, why am I thinking of starting a brewery? Because there's already all these great breweries from around the world, and then I said, there's already, maybe then there was 50 or 100 craft breweries in Australia. Now there's 650. So I thought there was probably a better opportunity for me personally, and that I could serve the industry better if I worked on the supply side. Mm-hmm. So we started a business, myself and a couple of friends, in 2013, mainly serving home brewers directly, delivering to people's doorsteps ingredients and supplies to make beer. That quickly grew as our customers. Some of them were basically, like all good startups, they were in their garage making beer at home, and then they wanted to go professional, so they would start to ask for ingredients in bigger sizes and bulk. And we also got approached by suppliers who were could see we were doing things a little bit differently, and said, would you like to take our products to craft brewers? And then we even had suppliers who had products for craft distillers. So we've just sort of grown organically with the industry. And it never stops amazing me just how fast it changes and how many new things are happening all the time.
Yeah, we got involved in the industry probably 2 years ago, was our first furore into the industry, and even since then, when you look at it, there's there's probably another 200 breweries have opened in the last probably 24 to 36 months or thereabouts.
I would think
And,
so.
I mean, you look at that, that basically the industry would have had to have either almost doubled in that period. You think about it, there may have been, say, 400, there's now 650, 700.
That's right.
Active operating commercial breweries.
Yes.
It's basically doubled in 3 years. It's enormous.
Yeah, and there's a lot in planning as well. So we're constantly, as a supplier to people in their garages as well as people in breweries, which are big garages, I guess, big sheds. We've constantly got people who are prototyping or what they call gypsy brewing, so brewing in someone else's facility and sending ingredients to them or sending ingredients to their contract brewery. So there's a lot in planning. And I think we spoke just before we started press record. The other explosion we've seen in the last couple of years is craft distilleries. And predominantly the growth too for both areas is into the regions. So I think the Craft Distillers Conference, the last one I went to was 2019 before the big flu. And they said something north of 90% of craft distilleries are in the regions. And I've certainly heard it bandied around at craft brewers conferences that maybe over 50% of craft breweries are in the region. So it's a really good story for regional and rural Australia as well.
There's a massive focus on localizing things and then growing out. So like owning your little patch first, and then expanding. And we've seen it with a number of the early growing breweries. They created partnerships that were local, and it might be partnerships with a pub and a sports team and that type of thing. But you have to start somewhere, right? Yeah. And if you can own a small patch, later on you can work out how to own a bigger patch. But you kind of got to you have to walk before you can run, I guess.
Yes.
Saturation. So obviously with this scale of breweries and distilleries coming on board, do you think the market's saturated? I mean, certainly with the way I look at it with beer, with the breweries, there seems to be a lot coming on, and there doesn't seem to be that much shelf space. What's your feeling?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't say saturation because as quickly as we say there's no room for one more, a new brewer will come into the industry, or if it's distilling, a new distiller will come into the industry with a different angle on what they want to do, and sometimes it'll just take off. So I think the industry goes through waves of evolution and revolution, but like a bicycle, the wheel spins around, and in some ways we've really just gone back to where brewing was in Australia in pre-colonial days. You mentioned local, because in the past, 100 years ago, you didn't have refrigerated transport, you didn't have supermarkets, so you brewed beer close to where people live. And now people are connecting with whether it's local breweries or local distilleries or local artisans, whether it's cheesemakers, coffee roasters, and there is also that circular local economy. People love their sourdough bakeries and that. So I don't think it's saturation. I think the competition has intensified, and brewers are very cognizant and aware of that, and so they're also very astute business people. So when we saw the hard seltzer trend, like we talked before about trends coming from the United States, the brewers didn't sit by and watch that happen. They thought, hang on, here's a new trend coming. And you could argue that seltzer really is the domain of the spirits makers because it's like vodka, lime and sodas, and then it exploded with different flavours. But the brewers sort of said, well, hang on, we can make a neutral soda water type, or hard soda as they would call it, and then we can flavour it, and we can do all that using our existing equipment. And likewise, they've even embraced non-alcoholic adult drinks, or low alcoholic adult drinks. So brewers are sort of saying, I've got equipment here, I can brew beer. They actually also are the front end to distilleries, so some of them are cottoning on to the fact that they can not only brew beer, but they could also distill spirits, or at least make the wash to make whiskey, or they could even brew their own base for gins. So brewers are sort of branching out, and I think we're seeing that with the new openings. Some of them come with private money and capital and hit the ground with a really big vision. Some of them are still those classic give it a crack Aussie entrepreneurs who will start in their garage and then see an opportunity in their local town. And I think there's always room for more breweries, but certainly the competition has intensified.
Yeah, I've found that the ones that have grown really steeply in the last 12 months are definitely doing something different.
Yes.
Groups Heaps Normal and
Yes.
Two Bays and
Yep.
they've you got gluten-free beer or your non-alcoholic
Yes.
beer. They're very, very different to what the usual standard way of doing things, and they're some of the ones that have really gone crazy over the last 12 months that I've seen.
That's it.
And we get we're privy to the right information, and you can see the growth, and it's really, really fast. So it'll be interesting to see how all these new entrants go, and because it ain't cheap, and getting set up is bloody expensive in that environment.
It is and it isn't. So I think the interesting thing is, and it's it's good that you guys are doing this podcast to help educate your customers about the business of brewing and managing your accounts and things like that, because you can do things very cheaply, and there have been craft brewers who have been very successful and grown over the years. You can buy equipment very cheaply from China. But the other thing is that if you do want to be a big brewer, and you mentioned a couple of very successful, very large brewers like Heaps Normal or Two Bays, who are doing very specific functional type drinks, one being gluten-free and one being low, no alcohol, you need to, and if you want to range with national retailers, you need to have expensive equipment. But again, and full credit to the Heaps Normal team, they didn't have a brewery. They had a great beer that they'd prototyped at home, like they'd home brewed up, and then they went to a very large, well-established contract facility and manufactured that, which they had the equipment that was required, tunnel pasteurization, things like that. So in the past that was never available to people, but now whether you're a food maker who creates an amazing gluten-free, low-sugar muesli bar or some cereal, you can go to contract manufacturing facilities, and there's plenty of contract manufacturing facilities for brewers and distillers. So you can almost test your product ideas without having to spend all that money on capital.
So as long as you can execute sales and marketing and branding, which is branding is so important in beer, I know that. But
yes,
as long as you can execute those functions, there are providers out there that can brew your beer as long as you can give them the prototype type of thing.
Yeah, I think another great success story at the moment that everyone's just blown away by is Better Beer from Nick at Torquay Beverages and the Mighty Craft team. And that's, was Nick's idea, and he worked with the... apologies to the very famous on Instagram, the something unemployed, but they're contract manufacturing that beer, and it's hitting a note with drinkers in terms of flavour and the proposition of the product. So there will always be, like we said with beer, there'll always be these breakout success stories that'll come out of left field, and people will go, wow, I didn't see that one coming. But at the same time, I think if you want to own your local patch, whether it's Wagga Wagga or Bendigo or Ballarat, you probably need a temple there and a brewery there. So I think it's, if you've got a very functional product that's different, like a low, no alcohol beer or beverage offering or something like that, then maybe you can contract manufacture that. And even the Heaps Normal team have said they want their own brewery, so they've raised money to brew their own future of low, no alcohol beverages. So yeah.
This podcast is obviously about this one here is obviously about beer and breweries and that type of thing.
Yes.
But it's also a business podcast.
Yes.
So when you wanted to get started, obviously you've had a long history in business. I was actually on your YouTube channel earlier, having a little look at some of your old presentations.
When I was a management consultant.
That's the one. That's the one.
Creativate.
So I had a good look through them, and so obviously you've got a background in business and you understand every lever and every mechanism that go into, I guess, a P&L, which is pretty important.
Yeah.
Can you run me through the setup of BeerCo? Obviously, there's we know you're not a brewery, but you obviously need to have a lot of the aspects that go into a brewery. Probably not the machinery, but everything else and stock on hand. Can you run me through the challenges of setting up a business like BeerCo, and then kind of some of the challenges that you faced early on in the piece?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I took the pots and pans, bootstrapping without, or wearing the boots with no laces on, shoestring startup approach. So I started, literally vacuum sealing hops on the kitchen table and packing up light dried malt extract, much to my wife's dismay, and she sort of kicked me out of the house. Eventually I went into a third-party warehouse called Hunter Express down in South Dandenong, and then they eventually kicked me out of there because I started with malt down there, and we shipped it to homebrew shops and directly to home brewers. But then I started putting fridges in and running them off power boards and then asking them to pick different things. So we took the approach that the internet and doing business through the internet was a revolution. I'd seen so many great internet businesses. I'd always struggled coming from the consumer packaged goods industry with why more companies didn't do direct sales, direct to consumer. And so we started with a website, and we were really insistent on all orders being placed online, and we still are, even with our trade customers and those that we give trade terms with. And the reason for that is we thought it was efficient from an ordering perspective, but it gave us a sense of a double check. So if someone telephoned an order in, and it happened when I moved into my warehouse in 2017, I'd be running around with the phone to my ear, packing a pallet or picking products, and then at the same time someone would order on the internet. So I figured it was the fairest and most efficient way for the orders to be dispatched in order of receipt of the orders. And also we had a printed record we could print out, and then I'd witnessed through working inside warehouse and logistics companies like Hunter Express the way they do it. Wherever there's a person involved, you have to have a double backup safety check. So one person would be the picker, and then another person would be the ticker, and they would tick the orders. And wherever humans are involved, as you know, much as we love humans, we make mistakes. So we tried to automate everything, and that was really from the point of view of making everything as efficient as possible. Because the other thing I was very cognizant of, whether you were someone making beer at home, or spirits at home, or a craft brewery or distillery, you really want your goods as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So that was one of my key principles. And then building relationships with our key suppliers, many of whom value that customer base of home brewers and distillers and craft brewers and distillers, but they're just not simply set up to serve them efficiently. So they were quite happy for us to be like their sub-distributor. Maybe they were looking after Lion Nathan or CUB or Asahi and dealing in trucks. So, they were like, if you can efficiently pick, pack and dispatch pallets with multiple malts on it to our customers, then you're doing us a service as well as your customers. So we tried to look for areas where we could offer value and in the genuine sense of the word, without sort of being, an intermediary or a middleman who didn't add value, both for suppliers and customers.
So kind of complementing the entire supply chain, because there's obviously gaps in every supply chain. Yeah,
there is, and obviously too, imported products. So there's lots of products that brewers use and distillers use that are imported, and of course we're just feeling absolute excruciating pain as they are. With the supply chain crumbling under the weight of COVID and the global stimulus and the shipping delays. So that's a real headwind that we're all facing together this year.
Can we go into that in a bit more detail?
Sure.
I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, because if the people that are going to listen to this podcast are going to be brewers, and I'd love to dig into the economic impacts of the supply chain issues.
Okay. Well, without going too far back, I know we were talking about crypto before, but basically, we've never seen a global fiscal stimulus like we have over the last couple of years. So all around the world, all the federal treasurers have printed money effectively, so pushed more money into the money supply. And our beautiful government has done it again, despite the fact inflation's at starting to pick up. So that coupled with the fact our service economy was taken away overnight, travel, restaurants, bars, cafes, etc., just caused a massive demand spike. And then the world's factory, China, has gone through some massive stresses in the last sort of 12 months. So they had energy shortages before the Beijing Olympics. They wanted the air clean and all that sort of thing. So they told a lot of factories and shut a lot of factories, and they're playing geopolitics with coal and that. So the manufacturing side of China slowed down. And then the other thing that happened was globally, we had COVID outbreaks at ports, and we had skeleton crews in factories. And effectively what we've seen is everyone buying more stuff, like not just a little bit more stuff. I think New South Wales bought it was phenomenal. It was like 6 times more home furnishings in 2021 than the previous year and stuff like that. So people have just ramped up demand, and then the system has broken. And like I've been talking to brewers about it, and it's open public knowledge, but we import malt from England, and we'd imported multiple containers. The shipping was, roughly speaking, pretty standard, 6 to 8 weeks. The price was pretty standard. We could budget that. We could get the malt in quickly, get it through to our customers. And then the last container we landed just after Christmas took twice as long and cost 60% more in terms of freight. And then when we sold a lot of that stock, because everyone was running out of stock, we went to our freight forwarders and said, we're going to need to import another container. And they said, oh, here's the bad news. The shipping price has gone up another 60%. And you're like, really? And it was pushing the price of just the transport cost of the malt pretty much to where we could buy a sack of domestic malt from our partners at Malt Europe. And so I was sort of saying, well, I can't look at my customers in the face and say, I'm going to double your malt price. And I was talking to a small brewer today who said he hasn't put a price rise through to his customers for 6 years, but they're all getting hit. We're all getting hit with price rises. So we've sort of created a bit of a monster, and the forecast on the shipping side of things from the global shipping experts is that monster won't start to die down until about middle of next year. So people are making decisions, buying less stuff, and people will get back on planes and go for holidays to see their loved ones and go to beautiful resorts and things. People are going back out to restaurants and bars. So we'd like to think that just the volume of general merchandise shipping around the world will drop, and also we'd like to think that the ports will get on top of the congestion, but at the moment it's really, really bad. And it's really bad in the United States. It's also quite bad in China, and they shut down Shanghai now for COVID, and also it's bad at Singapore. So yeah, system that worked beautifully for the last 20 years unfortunately is quite broken, and will be for about 18 months. So we're working really hard with all our suppliers to look for local substitute products, and for those essential products we're just asking everyone to plan for much longer lead times. We can't take it for granted. And even when I was shopping online yesterday at Coles or Woolworths, there's a lot of out of stocks. And I thought, if those guys can't bring in, frozen fruit or whatever it is that they're stocking in their freezers, it's really difficult for small businesses to secure raw materials. So we're just sort of encouraging people to be creative, buy local, back to the whole thing we were talking about.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's clear that vax mandates being across the globe destroyed the labour force for it might be a 10, 12, 14 week period there. And we know that put everything a long way behind.
Yeah.
It was probably a long way behind well prior to that, but that certainly didn't help.
Yeah.
And then you've got the addition of 7% inflation in the US. The UK is now up to 6.3% inflation annualized.
Yes.
So, and the UK it's growing, and the whole Russia thing is actually having all the sanctions are having a little bit of the opposite effect to what they thought that they would have, and they seem to be hurting the West a lot more than they're hurting Russia. So it's going to be really interesting times over the next the next 6 months are going to be weird, but I think longer term it's going to be really weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really, really hard to crystal ball things, but you sort of if everyone's been saying that volatility's been increasing for the last decade at least, whether it's climate volatility, seasonal for farming, price spikes on the markets, petrol, bananas, you name it, whatever. But if you look at things over like very, very long 100-year trend lines, they sort of generally head in the same direction. And yes, the governments have printed more money, so the price goes up. But effectively, what they've done is they've deflated the value of the Australian dollar or the US dollar. So we're getting less for it. Unfortunately, wages aren't picking up. But everyone has a job on the positive. Everyone enjoys a drink. Maybe everyone is also more health conscious than they were. I'm starting to sense that Australians are very physical, mental health aware, and are maybe trying to moderate their consumption, which is a good thing, rather than binge drinking. So we're probably still going to see the same mega trends we spoke about before, premiumisation. So instead of buying a slab of VB or Carlton and drinking on a Saturday afternoon and watching the footy or the barbecue or whatever, feeling worse for wear on the Sunday and not mowing the lawns and not spending time with the children, people are saying, well, maybe during the week I'll have a heaps normal so I can get up and function, and then in the weekend I might treat myself to a 4-pack of my favourite craft beer. So, and when they do that value equation, the prices are still good, but I think we're probably going to see consumption of alcohol in total drop, but the quality of the spirit or the beer will improve.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that to me says that the people that are going to suffer are going to be the majors where all the volume is and where all the, there's going to be your AB and Bevs and in Australia obviously CUB, because if the volume is being taken down and it's being more premium, then that would make sense, wouldn't it?
It's interesting you say that, because a guy much smarter than me, who was the founder of one of Australia's largest independent breweries, who's no longer independent, so you can do the guessing there, told me that there's two areas of the market where you can do really, really well. You can do really, really well if you're CUB or Lion, who produce beer at absolute scale and very efficiently, and they will always do well, and they can also muscle up to Woolworths and Coles and sort of stand toe-to-toe with them. And as the economy, if times get tough and the tradie, doesn't like the price of diesel and the Ranger, then they might trade back to a slab of VB or a slab of Lion 2Es or 4X Gold. At the other end, there are people who have a lot of money and are always wanting the absolute best, especially cheese, the best sparkling wine, the best craft beer and things like that. It's if you're in the middle that you get hollowed out. So CUB's not going anywhere, Lion's not going anywhere, Asahi, or Asahi owns CUB now, and Coopers. But if you're a middle sort of a craft brewer who maybe you started in Brisbane or Sydney and you're pushing into another state, if you're overstretching yourself financially and you don't have security over your immediate local precinct and you don't have your beer in every single bar and your beers in every bottle shop, and you're not making outstanding product for that top end consumer, you're at risk. So it's the people in the middle of that curve, and so it's like with bread making, you've got artisan sourdough selling at $8 at your local regional bakery, and then in the supermarket you can get something for half the price, but it's only Tip Top or Vogel's.
Yep.
So I would say it's the mid-size people who are maybe a bit lost, not sure what they're doing, what their purpose is or reason for being.
So things like the more expensive bread in the supermarket might be could be the sufferer. No, it makes sense. It's always the middle class that get hollowed out.
Unfortunately, that is happening. Yeah, that's actually happening on a global scale. The middle class is getting hollowed out. It's happening in the United States as well.
Yes.
But the middle class actually provides the wealth for a democracy. But that's another topic for another podcast.
Unfortunately, people that lead the countries and states have kind of forgotten about that a little bit. But which will be, absolutely, it's a different conversation. But
yeah.
Who in your beer career, who was the person that got you interested in beer?
Yeah, interesting. So, I was fortunate enough to have worked in a large corporate brewery, which was Foster's, albeit on the sales and marketing side of things. And to their credit, they are, still as Asahi/CUB passionate brewers. So I remember we would have time at the Abbotsford Brewery and sensory training with Tina Panutzis, who's still there, and she's amazing. And whilst, you could sort of knock the big brewers for saying they just brew, 10 different styles of lager, they were very passionate about their lager. And so I was fortunate, I worked in the international side of that business. So we looked after Asia exports, and we were sort of tasked with the focus of selling Foster's through Asia. So we had a lot of, jokingly referred to as all the older brewers who'd been put out to pasture, but they were really, really good brewers who'd been there for 25 years. So they also installed in me the value of quality and, how to taste beer properly, appreciate it, and how to match it with food. But I tend to follow, I don't follow individual brewers. I love all the brewers in Australia. I do love a lot of the brewers from the US and Europe as well. And I've always gone to the Home Brewers Conference, and they have really cool brewers come out from the US and the UK. So they had John Keeling come out from England, from Fulham's, from London Pride and Chiswick Bitter and all that sort of thing, which Fuller's Brewery in London, and he was just an amazing guy. They had Vinny come out from Russian River, Mitch Steele was at Stone and that, and I've met people like Matt Brindleston from Firestone Walker, and all of those brewers, just like we've got amazing brewers here in Australia, are just incredibly passionate about beer. Like some people would say, the last thing that person wants to talk to you about is beer, but I sat next to Mitch Steele at the Australian National Home Brewers Conference and bent his ear for about 2 hours over dinner about beer, and he just kept listening intently and asking questions and talking back, and it's because they're so passionate about it. So I always say to people, don't get into craft brewing or craft distilling unless you're passionate about it, because like we mentioned before, the business challenges are tough. So you need to be good at your game and just have that passion to override the tough moments.
Yeah, I think the people that get into it for the economic reasons and economic benefits, it's the wrong reason. It's you do need to be 100% all in.
Yes.
It can't be a side thought. It can't be a second business. It needs to be everything.
Yes.
It seems.
Yeah, it is. It is, because if you think about it, who was listening to the other day, they were talking about the value of brands. So Coca-Cola is a product, and it was the world's most valuable brand. And the old argument was there was always one within arm's reach. There's probably a Coke in your fridge here.
It is at Greg's house, so probably not. His body's a temple.
Okay, he might be a Pepsi Max man, but that's been overtaken by Apple, and then people keep thinking that Apple is a hardware company, and they are. They make amazing laptops and all that, but it's really the software that got the adoration and locks everyone in. And so when you talk about getting rich brewing, you're not going to get rich brewing because it's a capital intensive business where you have to keep buying stainless steel. You have to employ a lot of staff. Software is going to get you rich much faster. Maybe you guys know that better than anyone, but I love Xero accounting software. We use it at our business. We were born online. I love Shopify. And once you build out a piece of software, the incremental customer acquisition cost is close to zero. But as a brewer, say you get your local postcode or your local region, say you're down the Bellarine Peninsula, and then you go, right, now we're going to attack Melbourne and get all the tap points in Melbourne. That costs you more to get those tap points because you have to transport it up from Torquay or wherever you are. Or if you're a Sydney brewer and you say, we want to move into Queensland State, you've got to pay all that transport cost. But with software, it's free to send it through the wires of the internet. And then when you get more customers, you get more engineers and you build more features and you get a network effect. So, don't enter the brewing industry to get rich. I think that's the opposite. You're probably going to get poor.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say with Apple. That we look at it the same way. They suck people in with the shiny objects, but they retain people by hemming them in almost with their software. You can't leave the iTunes store. You can't leave the App Store.
Yeah.
Everything, that's what retains.
Yeah.
And the shiny objects are the things that actually bring people to the party, I guess.
Exactly.
So where's your business going to go in the next kind of 24 months?
Yeah, it's look, to be brutally honest, and I always try and be open and honest and transparent. I've sort of said to everyone inside my business and outside my business, this year's going to be the toughest of the last three. So 2020 was a bit of a shock to everyone, and probably a few of us drank our way through that, myself included. So that wasn't so bad. 2021, there was still some stimulus and that sort of thing out there. 2022, we are going to see business closures. So, open full confession, before I came here, I parked the car a couple of blocks away and I walked around Chapel Street, Prahran, just looking to see how many for lease signs there are. And, it's interesting. I still see great innovative food businesses and people offering coffee out of windows, but I see a lot of empty real estate. And I've been out on the road in the last 3 or 4 weeks, everywhere from sort of Reservoir, Preston, down the southeast today, and there is a lot of businesses closing. So I think, hand on heart confession, I think a lot of people took the checks, and I think now they're winding up their businesses. So I think now more than ever, it's important you have something like Pencil, and you have good tight control over your trade credit. And I'm telling all my great customers in craft brewing who are family independent businesses to not sit by and let your margins get eaten up. If your prices go up in terms of the inputs to your processes and you've done everything you can from a productivity efficiency point of view, you have to lift your prices. So for us at BeerCo, it's all about get the products that we know will sell, price our products profitably but not high margin. We've never tried to gouge our customers or anything like that. Ride through this wave. I think the good thing about our industry is because predominantly those 650 craft brewers are independent and they're in there, and for one way or another the investors are in, because it's not easy to liquidate your investment, and same with the distilleries, they will ride through this year. But then I think we'll probably see it really start to pick up in the spring, I'm hoping. People will start moving around, getting out to the regional holidays and having a beer and having a drink, and the camping holidays are back up again, which is great. I just sort of think to people, my own perspective is to sort of listen, get close to customers, stay close to suppliers, and work the balance sheet hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any business with a shop front, any retail business, one of the things that we predicted this a couple of years ago, and it was always going to come back and bite everyone on the arse, is the fact that people weren't able to pay their rent, and then and the government put in place a number of pieces of legislation where the landlord would have to negotiate with the tenant and all these type of things. What they didn't do, though, they didn't plan for the fact that a local cafe or a restaurant or what have you that was paying $100,000 of rent, their rent next year was effectively going to be $200,000 because it would continue to accrue. Agreed. Now they couldn't pay it off, and all this rent continued to accrue, and then you've got landlords who are asking for it and asking you to pay double repayments. It's untenable to do business that way, and that's my feeling is that's what the pinch is, because they didn't have to pay power for power while they were closed. There was all the other costs, staff costs went away. The only thing that didn't go away was rent, and rents effectively just crept up and doubled or probably 2.5 times what it was. And it's just, it's impossible for a retail business to get out of that. Unless they've got big capital backers, it's just impossible. So this is a making of government closures. It's I've done every other sum in the book, and there's nothing else in my head that has had as such a capital effect and such a cash flow and a capital effect on retail businesses as the fact that their rent was unable to be paid, and now they have to pay it, and they have to pay the arrears, and that's the killer.
I think if small businesses are walking away from untenable leases, and if they have to unfortunately close and then reopen, then good on them, because that's the market operating the way the market should. I think the risk for our customers, our craft brewers and distillers, and I'm talking to you guys here, is make sure you don't go long with on-premise customers and extend credit and extend credit and extend credit, and get played off against the next craft brewer and the next craft distiller. Because if, like you say, the underpinnings of their business are uneconomic because their rents are exorbitant, and they are, we all know that. Everyone knows that Australia, we have a big property problem. It's too expensive for residential and commercial property. Then that is a blowback. So that blows back to the craft brewery or craft distillery, because then they can't pay their suppliers, and and I guess that's where the tools that you guys sell and the software is really, really important. So anything that collects the money efficiently, and also anything that alerts small businesses to credit risk. I think this is a year that we will see those closures. Like you said, they kick the can down the road around business closures, and that's a healthy part of the economy, to be brutally honest. You have to have businesses closes and then new ones open up. I think we're going to see a lot of that happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The hospitality industry was saturated 3 years ago. Certainly cafes and restaurants, they just opened everywhere, and
Right.
there was always going to be a slight correction. But obviously, this the last 2 years on top of it have corrected it, but they've obviously gone beyond that, and it'll get back to a point of equilibrium where there's enough business out there for the amount of places there are.
Yeah.
But right now, there's too many places for the number of people who want to go and dine.
Okay.
That's just the reality.
Okay.
But there's places closing everywhere, and as you said, you've just walked down Chapel Street this afternoon.
Yeah.
We live. Both Greg and I live within earshot of Chapel Street, and we've noticed the South Yarra end. So
Yes.
between Toorak Road and Malvern Road was the first to go.
Yep.
That was 10 years ago until, say, 5 or 6 years ago. And then the area from Malvern Road to High Street went, and then now it's Windsor. So as those rents increased, the standard market conditions pushed back against it, and people just wouldn't lease these places because the rents got too exorbitant.
Yeah.
And they've told the landlords what it is. And I think the big commercial landlords, mind you, they've got plenty of capital, most of them, but they're going to really feel it. Like in the city, half of the city office blocks are empty now.
That's right.
And every single business knows that working from home is the future for part of their workforce.
Yes.
So the commercial real estate market is going to, unless they own their property outright, which a lot of them do, the ones that are leveraged are going to see some pain in the next little bit. And to be honest, they've probably had it coming for a little bit with the amount that they've been requesting from tenants.
Yeah. Look, it'd be nice to see rents drop and property prices drop, because the reality is it's not a productive asset. It doesn't create jobs. Properties don't create jobs other than the builders who build them. So
short term though, right?
Yeah. So if we could have affordable housing in Australia and lower rents, we'll see more entrepreneurs have a go at a bar and a cafe, and we'll see more people who have money invest in startups. So that's a big problem, but unfortunately, it's untouchable in Australia, and I think 1 in 7 Australians have an investment property negatively geared, and 1 in 3 politicians. So these are things you can't change about Australia. We're the second highest cost of doing business in the world, behind Switzerland, and it's really hard when I'm trying to explain that to our international suppliers. They just can't understand how expensive it is here, and that has a cascading effect. So expensive rent means high wages so that people can afford to rent. So I hope that we do see a property collapse, as much as it'll hurt a lot of people, because it will help business, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the big buildings and the office towers, like the NAB's got 10,000 spaces of office space in the city, and it's only 3% occupied, but the reality is they're on very long leases. And the NAB's going to keep paying that lease, and they'll repurpose it, and they'll figure it out, and they'll sublet it, and that's just the market taking its course. I think the key thing we just need to think about in small medium business is, be smart with your software choices and stay on top of your books this year.
The biggest risk for small businesses is labour. Labour's the massive cost, and it's actually debilitating, certainly for service businesses, but even supply businesses. The labour, everything is labour intensive to a point.
Yep.
But and you automate as much as you can, but the cost of basic labour now is just crazy, and the government is continuing to push wages to go up, and they will continue because that's where all their voters are.
Yep.
So we get that. It does make it very difficult for businesses, and that's every business across the across the whole gamut. Every
Yeah.
business has people.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be more incentive for small and growing businesses in Australia. I just don't think there is enough incentive.
Yeah.
You work hard and you employ people, and and it is tough at the best and the worst of times.
Yeah.
But I just think that the government does need to do something for small businesses, because small business owners are the ones who are putting their ass on the line and taking all the risks and putting everything they've got into it. And the amount of people that have lost a lot of stuff over the last 36 months.
Yeah.
And there'll be no recouping any of that. They have to start again.
Yeah.
Which lucky business owners are durable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a challenge for the country, I think.
Yeah, look, I think the small businesses, the government actually understands a lot more about them than they let on. So during the COVID pandemic, they did cash flow boost to small businesses, and a lot of smart small businesses, bought some capital equipment. Like we bought a cool room, and I call it ScoMo's cool room, because we wouldn't have been able to afford it otherwise, to help store our hops and our enzymes and everything else. And I've seen that, so I think the smart small businesses will use those checks wisely. I think the other thing is for small businesses is you just got to play the hand that you get dealt, and you have to be clever, like you said, and that sort of thing. But Australians love having a go against all the odds, and there's a lot of great success stories coming out all the time. I think you have to pay your staff at least minimum wage, if not better, and treat your staff with respect, because they'll help you grow your business. But yeah, just like you said, try and automate as much as we can, because we are in a high labour cost country, and stay up. Use your, if you're small and medium-sized business, use that to your advantage. So the breweries that have got tap rooms that tap into their community, like you mentioned, sponsoring the local teams and connecting with local customers and selling locally. That's a really strong barrier against big business. And everyone's in the same boat. So ordinary Australians want to support their local businesses.
So the audience of this podcast is obviously breweries, and I know they're one of your customer sets. You've got one which is direct to consumer, and the other is breweries. Can you just to finish off? Can you give a little bit of a plug to BeerCo, and just explain exactly how you can help any breweries out there?
Yeah, sure thing. Oh, look, in terms of what we do, Tim, it's pretty simple. We try and supply the ingredients you need to make beer, and we also supply distillers. So in the case of brewing, it's we supply malts. We have local Victorian sown, grown and malted malt Europe Pilsen malt, malted down at Geelong. It's beautiful, clean, crisp, consistent Pilsner malt, and it's used by major brewers. And I say to the small brewers, the reason the major brewers are using that malt is because it's consistent and it's really well made. So I encourage people to buy that. It's more affordable than imported malts. We also import premium crisp malt. We've been around for 150 years from the UK. That's where we're feeling a lot of stress with the supply chain and Putin's gas prices going up. And we sell Unigrain locally malted cereals, again a family-owned company, the May family, in Smeaton, Ballarat. So we're encouraging customers to use them. We don't import and sell hops, but we do resell a lot of different hops. So I'm telling customers, preserve your cash flow. So don't contract hops when demand's up and down, or you don't know whether they're going to drink this beer next week or that beer the next week. Buy what you need for your brews this week or this month, and hops come in big sizes, like 20 kilo boxes, and they could be north of $800 to $1,000 for a wholesale price. So if you only need 3 kilos, don't buy a box and put cash in the cool room. We sell dried brewing yeasts that from other wholesalers, and we also import some from the United States. And then we're increasingly selling more what we would call adjuncts, interesting things like botanicals for distillers, but brewers use them as well, and aids like enzymes which help make your brewery more efficient, and also flavours. So we're back to brewers jumping on new trends. We've seen some of our customers as far north as Brisbane who are entrepreneurial and have a great tap room. They're thinking, well, I'm selling all this beer here, and I can see there's a lot of people coming for lunch and the weekends or drinks after work who don't drink beer. Why don't I try making some seltzer? Because I've got the equipment, I can make seltzer, and that's really easy to make. And we sell them the rice syrup, and we sell them the flavours. And again, because they're in a tap room environment, they control or have a say over what the customers drink, and I've seen a good uptake. So that's an incremental sell. And then the other thing is just give us a call and have a chat. I'm unfortunately not going to extend trade credit or terms, but if there are difficulties and problems, and you're open and transparent, just like I am with our suppliers when we hit the wall, then just reach out and talk to us. Or if you've had a supplier who can't supply you something, reach out, because I think this year is about mates helping mates in the industry, and we're all getting back to normal. We're getting back to sports. We're getting back to kids back to school. We're getting back to our regular working week. Maybe it's a split week, like you mentioned, a hybrid week, a few days in the office, a few days at home. So, let's just work together to sort of find out what that new normal looks like, because I think we haven't sort of still found that. But yeah, that's our plug. We're always here at any time. You can call us at the warehouse or email us at service@beerco.com.au. All our products are online as well.
Great, mate. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
That was great.
Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Cheers.